Houston Remember When Holiday Memories is made possible in part through grants from the Fondren Foundation, Shell Oil Company Foundation on behalf of the employees of Shell Oil Company, and Houston Endowment, a philanthropy endowed by Mr. and Mrs. Jesse H. Jones.
Hi, I'm Doug Johnson, your host for this edition of Houston Remember When, Holiday Memories. When I was growing up, the holiday season was unlike any other time of the year, and for most of us, it still is. In a few short weeks, our community quickly moves from ghosts and goblins to gridiron passion, and on to the sharing of gifts and counting down the final minutes of the passing year. Many longtime Houstonians can recall places and events that highlighted their holiday seasons decades ago, when the city was young, and the key to a child's world was usually imagination.
The first Halloween costume I can remember making, we made out of brown paper grocery bags, spray painted them with aluminum paint, and I was a robot, and so I had kind of a square head. I put a blinking light, I did this myself, a blinking light right on the top, and I figured in order to keep it going, as long as I wanted to be Halloween trick-or-treating, a little D-cell wouldn't do it. So I had one of these these old single-cell batteries. They're about this tall, about this big around, that I kind of stuffed in my pants or in my back pocket or something. And we worked the neighborhood with that. I do remember, even though we had sprayed the paint earlier, after a while, I had to take that top off. The fumes were still just a little too much. That and the fact that it seems like later in the evening some wires got crossed and my back pocket got a little warm, but other than that was a lot of fun.
We had to be innovative. We used a lot of mercurochrome to paint our faces and powders and different things. If you were fortunate, you can get a little black mask like the Lone Ranger or something, and we would get sheets and we'd go out as ghosts.
We loved stilts. We had stilts made out of old tin cans and wire. So the wire was long enough that we could hold it. And we would walk on those stilts. We would put them on Halloween, and so we could make a lot of noise.
Once I was a witch. I loved that. And I had a broom and everything.
Since I was born almost on Halloween, all my birthday parties had a Halloween flavor with, even as a little kid, maybe kindergarten, I can remember my kindergarten with all the school kids coming over and eating witch ice cream. They were little molded ice cream figures that looked like witches.
There'd be all kinds of events, like there was bobbing for apples and there were some other games, and you wandered around the room and participated in all of the fun things.
One Halloween we went out and worked the street in one costume, came home and changed to another costume and did it again. Well, we fooled no one.
The trick-or-treat was the most important. That we always went trick-or-treating, of course, and the boys did the bad things, like putting soap on the streetcar track, and not real vicious things, but just kind of mischievous things.
What I would do is, you take these bombs and blow them, and they come up. Then you fill them full of water. They're flat at first. You blow air in them, make them come up. Fill them full of water. And I was doing this, and I blew this bomb up and filled it full of water, and I leaned over the balcony, and somebody was there, and I didn't pay much attention, and so I dropped it. And as it turned out, it was my father. And of course, he looked up, and I was standing there looking over the balcony, and I didn't realize it was him until I heard him call my name. So that was the end of my water bombs.
Halloween was a little more fun in some ways. Trick-or-treat was the big thing. And firecrackers were allowed in town. We just fired them off. We had a couple of big elm trees in the front yard, so we'd put pinwheels on them, flash, and we'd shoot rockets up in the air, and there'd be somebody always in the next block and still, hey, what are you doing?
One Halloween that in the morning, there was an outhouse right on Main Street, right on the square, right downtown. Some boys, what they did, they tilted the back of the pickup truck and they went and put it right on Main Street. It was sitting right on Main Street, the outhouse was.
We would take a fish hook, with a piece of fishing line on it. We'd hook it in someone's window, and we'd stretch it across the street and tighten it up, and you could take a piece of rosin and rub on the line, and it would roar and make that screen vibrate, and it'd sound like a line coming in the window. See?
We made a thing called a tic-tac, and it was a spool that we notched all around the edge of it, and we put a nail through it, through the hole, and we wrapped string around it, and then we would put that up against somebody's window and pull that string, and it'd go brrrt. We thought that was so cute and ornery and devilish and fun.
My uncle would get him to bang on the windows, you know, as he walked down outside on the hallway, and just scared the fool out of me, because, you know, it was something to do with the Halloween, that bring the ghosts and the goblins were coming in on.
And one Halloween, we walked to town to be in the Halloween fun on Main Street.
Halloween was very special for me and my sister. We got to go downtown at night instead of just during the afternoons when we were young. And we dressed up as clowns.
Many times on Halloween, they would block off 2 or 3, 4 blocks of Main Street, which basically at that time, I don't think it was more than 10 blocks long. And everybody was in costumes, and it was kind of a Mardi Gras atmosphere.
Have a lot of paddles, and they'd reach out, and when people would walk by, you know, with a tight uniform or tight costume, they'd reach out and smack them in and hide the paddle. And I think this gal that got pinched, she had on a little scanty Halloween costume, and some guy pinched her, and she turned around and lapped one on him.
And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, that boy went by me and he pinched me." And oh, I said, "That's all right. He's just trying to be friendly. This is just fun time." And we didn't, I don't think we had costumes. Some people were dressed in costumes, but some weren't. And we just had more fun.
From World War I to the Second World War, Armistice Day was also celebrated in downtown Houston. During this period, the November 11th parade was one of the biggest events of the year.
Armistice Day, we always went downtown. It's a very festive occasion. It was in the afternoons, and everyone was selling poppies, and we would walk around, my mom and my granddaddy, and sometimes just me and my granddad would buy poppies from every vendor on every corner, and everyone was wearing poppies. We would put one on, and then we would come home with armloads of poppies for all of the family who couldn't go to town.
When the World War I, of course, when the boys came back and when they were in the hospital, they had no income whatever, none whatever. And so they made these little red poppies out of crepe paper and sold them for whatever you would get for them. And that money was used only for those veterans in the hospitals.
The Armistice Day Parades in those days when the Army got to march, it was fun for a little kid. They had the World War I helmets, the British helmets, and the Stuart tanks, the light tanks would come rumbling along, and it was exciting. And then in about 1942, there was a vacant lot down there. I don't know what's there now, but they had a German Messerschmitt 109, and everybody got to go down and climb up in the wing and look in that thing. And that kind of was exciting for a little boy.
You didn't have a big Air Force flying overhead, because the flying Jennies, they're scared to fly them over town. They may quit and kill somebody, land on you. But it was all banners and little flags, and the kids would line up on the street, and it was pretty exciting.
Each Armistice Day that I was in Santa Jacinta, the group marched in the parade, and sometimes it was pretty cold, but our costumes were warm. It was not like they are now, I guarantee you.
The end of World War II gave the city reason to be happy, but it also served to bring the pageantry of Armistice Day to a close.
On that day, they closed off part of Main Street, and there was hundreds of people there. And there was a whole group of servicemen there on furlough at the time, and there were Marines and sailors and soldiers there. And they were just acting up, real happy that the war was over and they weren't going to have to go back overseas again. So they were dancing and singing and hollering and whooping, and they all took off their caps and they threw them up in the air as high as they could throw them. And I think they were trying to throw them on top of the buildings. Of course, it didn't work. When the hats came back down, or the caps came back down, they caught them. And whatever cap they caught, they just put on. There was sailors with soldiers' hats on, and there was soldiers with sailors' hats on, and brown uniforms with white hats, and white uniforms with brown hats, and it was just all hilarious and a great thing to see and a great thing to remember.
For most families, Thanksgiving was another event to remember, and a time when the meal was more likely to involve an axe and Mom's secret recipes.
And Thanksgiving was an occasion of Thanksgiving. People coming through the Depression at that time were, if you could afford to have a nice turkey dinner and your family and whatever, that was a Thanksgiving experience. It meant something.
And we had a feast. Oh, it was like a Thanksgiving feast. We were so glad to have some flour to make some biscuits. Rolls? No, Texans didn't know about rolls. All we ate was cornbread and biscuits, even in my day.
We had a turkey every Thanksgiving. Turkey and dressing, and sweet potatoes, and I guess kale. We didn't have mustard green. Maybe we had mustard green. Didn't have that much, though.
And the dressing was just delicious. And that was my choice of the Thanksgiving dinner, would be the dressing.
Sometimes we would have to choose, and the children, the young people, would have slices off the drumstick, but that really wasn't it. The main thing was to hold it in your hand.
Came Thanksgiving time, we had what I thought was turkey, and it turned out my grandfather was visiting from Indiana, and he had butchered one of my rabbits. And I went into a decline because I was killed that he had killed one of my rabbits, and worse, I had eaten it.
I used to go with my mother down to the original old farmer's market. Got your turkey, and of course it was live. Now chickens she would take home and take care of. Turkey was more than she could handle. So she would have the vendor, the farmer, put it to rest, and she'd take it home, clean it, and take the feathers off, whatever you have to do.
My mother would never eat anything but a live fowl, and we would go down there to the square. All the farmers would come in real early in the morning, and everything was fresh, and it was so large. And she would buy a turkey or a chicken and come home and hang it on the clothesline, and it got its neck. But we always had, and of course she saved all the feathers and would wash them and hang them out to dry, and all our pillows were down pillows.
Thanksgiving, I suppose for most people, was a home celebration more than a get out and be together. I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself because it was with my family before I married and after. Thanksgiving was something that you enjoyed and did at home.
"1947 saw the opening of Foley's ultra-modern downtown department store. The event even drew national attention. Soon after, in 1949, Foley's launched what was to become one of Houston's grandest holiday parades.
We would go early as possible so we could get a parking space, and then we would all pile out of the car and pile on top of the hood.
We took little camp chairs, if I'm remembering. I'm not sure what that is, but we would sit along the curb.
It was a big thing for downtown because we didn't have anything like that at all. Nothing to compare it with.
You know, people on both sides of the street, down Main Street it came, and we were amazed to see these floating balloons and these large animal-type balloons.
They enjoyed it very much, seeing that turkey, that artificial turkey that Foley brought out.
And we would see the bands and so forth. Yates, Wheatley, and Booker T. Washington's band would participate in these.
It was a very, very cold day, but my daughter Deborah got a chance to be in the parade, and we were very excited because we had to be down there very early, and we had to stay until it was all over. And to see her on one of the floats in the parade was very, very exciting to us.
And I used to parade in the Foley's parade as a clown. I had a fright wig somebody gave me, with a blonde wig, and I put that wig on. And I had a bag of water underneath my arm. It hung over my arm here, and I had run a little water, a little tiny, like an IV tube. I ran it up my finger and taped it here. And I had a skunk. Someone gave me a stuffed skunk. It was imitation skunk. And I know I walked in that parade, and I'd ask the kids, I said, "Do you want to see my kitty?" And I'd walk up with that skunk and raise his tail up, and I'd mash down on this bag, and that water would squirt about 30 feet in the air. And people would run all over themselves trying to get away from it. I had a lot of fun with that.
You know, I remember Santa Claus is coming down the street in the parade.
And they loved Santa Claus, and they loved the cowboys and the Indians and all the clowns and the balloons and everything.
It was like feeling, well, now Houston is right up there with New York City. They've got a Macy's parade, and we've got a Foley's parade. And Foley's really went all out for it. It was wonderful.
Another Thanksgiving Day ritual sprang from the early 20th century. Houston's 3 black high schools fought for gridiron honor each Armistice Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Then in 1934, Wheatley and Yates became the annual Thanksgiving Day matchup, a competition that would last for over 3 decades.
You went to the parade downtown, you had dinner, and then you went out to the football game.
I think I was about 6 years old, and I think I was just awestruck with the number of people that were there. I mean, people everywhere.
A family gathering on Thanksgiving with thousands and thousands of people. And at one time, they had classed the game as the most exciting and the game that had the most people in the United States as relate to high school game.
When I first saw the Thanksgiving Day game, I just knew then that I was hooked. And as a kid growing up, I knew I had to play in one of those games.
You couldn't get into the place. Jefferson Stadium held 22,000 people, and it was difficult to get a ticket.
We had Ernest Lang, he was to us as a young boy growing up, he was our Michael Jordan. He was an excellent football player. He scored 32 touchdowns in 10 football games.
It was the best season that I had in terms of scoring, and I think that it was at the time a record.
Some would dress as if they were going to church, and some would sport attires, but just the mere fact that they would come so early from all over Texas, not just so much Houston, to just see this.
We have a girl who was elected Miss Yates. The competition was so great when the girls would come out on the field, we would almost stop speaking to each other because we were so, I guess, football conscious.
My mother and father graduated from Yates in the 30s, and I believe this is why we had such a tradition, a family tradition of going to the games, because they would attend.
Usually, Wheatley-ites and Wheatley sympathizers would be rooting for Wheatley. Yates would be rooting for Yates, but we didn't have any bad feelings toward each other.
That was the crowning glory of the season, beating Wheatley on Thanksgiving and Wheatley beating Yates on Thanksgiving.
We just enjoyed the games, and whoever won, well, we were glad they won.
When the schools became integrated and we joined the HISD athletic program, it was sort of painful to see the Thanksgiving game end, because it was just something that everybody had grown to look forward to. It had become accustomed to looking forward to and preparing for Yates and Wheatley to play at Thanksgiving. So it was sad. It was a sad time to me, for the city.
For the followers of early Southwest Conference football, Rice was the local power. And the 1950 season gave birth to the modern era of sports in Houston, along with a unique holiday season to remember.
I can remember the football games. That was part of the life here in Houston. It was, you know, there wasn't that many things to do, you know, so going to the Rice football game was a big deal in those days.
Rice Stadium, as it is today, did not exist. There was a stadium there, but it was a rickety old thing. It probably held 20,000 people.
And I can remember standing there in those bleachers at the football games with tears running down my face. I was so mad because nobody was yelling.
Old Rice Stadium, I remember well because I was a Boy Scout usher there. We got there late. My mom had picked up a bunch of us and got there late, and we were at the end of the line as they were taking the Boy Scout ushers in, and we were all screaming and hollering. And it turned out, of course, that the front of the line got the first row, and the end of the line got the 50-yard line row. So here we were, and we were all of a sudden, it dawned on us, we're going to be the ushers on the 50-yard line. We were.
The new stadium was suggested, and it was actually built, and it was built overnight, it seemed, to everyone who was on campus. Brown and Root did the construction, and they worked 24 hours a day. And it was wonderful. Any time of the day or night, you could go out there and watch the stadium just magically appear.
They built a high platform that you could walk up a good many, about 10 or 12 steps, get up there, and it had a railing around it. And it was a place where you could watch what was happening.
They honestly didn't start until the late January. And once the summer got around and weather got good, they started putting on 3 shifts a day to get things finished.
All of these digger-uppers were down there running around like ants, digging up this and bringing it up to be loaded on trucks and taken someplace else. And it was such fun to go and watch it.
But we played in the last weekend in September, played ball on there on a nice field from January to the end of September. 70,000 seats, and there were 50 some odd filled in that first game too. And it was quite a ball game. Rice beat Santa Clara. They were a good team in those days.
And I remember when Rice Stadium opened, we had a parade downtown, and I recall that there was about 80 bands that participated.
But I remember sitting up there, and I had a date. We went up and sat in the upper deck, and it was a great place to play, and we were Rice was leading at halftime, and the band came out, and Patty Page was the great singer of that period. And they're dedicating the stadium and all its dignitaries, and she gets in the middle of the national anthem and forgot the words. I mean, blank, blah. And the whole place is just, and somebody did something, must have, I don't know, I was sitting up there, my date and I were laughing, and everybody else. Felt sorry for her later.
It was a very joyous occasion because, you know, we had this big, huge stadium. And it was a real happy time for everybody.
It wasn't until 1946 that the University of Houston fielded its first football team. For Cougar alumni, that inaugural season ranks first in their book of holiday memories.
Jewel Wallace was our first coach, and he's one of the finest gentlemen that ever lived. He was very thorough. He was very quiet with the boys, but everyone looked up to him. He didn't set any specific goals. He just said that he would like for us to do our best. Since we were first, this was the first year that we were playing, he said that he would like to show a halfway civilized, a decent record, and that's what I think we tried to do.
Due to the war, the first U of H team had few true freshmen.
It was a transition for a lot of the players because about 90% of the old players, or the old men they called us, we had been in the service for 4 years, and our quarterback, that was my ball holder, was Charlie Bonici. Charlie was very good with deception. He had long hands, large hands and fingers, and he could palm the ball. He'd take the ball and he would fake it to a back running through the line and lay it on his hip. And he'd run outside and just kind of walk around and then take off for the flag. And he scored about 5 or 6 touchdowns the first year on bootlegs, we called it.
That historic season began with a game against SLI, Southwestern Louisiana Institute.
We were beaten in the first game by, I think, SLI 12-7, something like that. And then everyone wanted to win, so we were behind at the half up at West Texas, 12-0. We came back in the third quarter and we scored, and I got an extra point, and we scored again in the fourth quarter, and I got another extra point, and we finally won by 14-12. We were happy to put the first win on the scoreboard.
A victory in their second game put the first Cougar win in the record books. And when the players' train returned from Canyon, Texas, well-wishers and the media were waiting.
When we got off the train at Union Station, they came up and said they'd like to take some pictures. Well, George Wright was doing some publicity for us. He asked Coach Wallace if he would step down on the ground, and when I stepped off of the train, if he would hold my foot up in the air. And they were kidding me about that later, because Mr. Wright, on the headlines underneath that, he put the man with the golden toe. So that was what some of my friends called me for a long time after that, after we won that first game. Being able to come back from the service and go back to college and play ball with a group of boys, it was quite an experience. We thoroughly enjoyed it. I think everyone that played those first few years out there really enjoyed it.
Toyland, Ice Capades, and more when we return with the second part of Holiday Memories. It's coming up right after this short break. Don't go away. Late November marked the beginning of another memorable holiday occasion, and you didn't need to look far to see the season taking shape around you.
Thanksgiving was kind of the starting point for Christmas. That's when people started decorating, and the city started decorating.
At one time they had sprigs of holly hanging on the sides of the streets, only for maybe 2 or 3 blocks, just Main Street. And it was usually right around Foley's, with maybe a block or 2 on each side, and the Vice Hotel down that far.
Daddy did decorate the streets at Christmas with garlands. They would get real big buckets full of greens, baskets really, and tie a rope at one end of the warehouse and to the other, and then the men would stand there and wrap the greens. And at night, he would take them down and hang them across the street and on the light post. They did it at night because there wasn't much traffic in Houston at nighttime.
The greenery was pretty. And they used to have trees too, decorating downtown. Christmas trees would be at the intersection of various streets, like Main and Rusk and Main and Prairie and all those. They would have beautiful street decoration in those strategic places. Of course, the center of Houston then was the Rice Hotel. They always had a big Christmas tree there, and that was always lovely.
We had the trees brought in, and then we decorated the tree. I mean, it was 6, 8 foot ladder. I mean, 8, 10 foot ladders we had in there to get to the top, you know, bring it. But the trees were always beautiful, you know, decorated. Then we had wall sconces. We hung different decorations on them, and just about anything in the lobby where you can hang anything was, you know, decorated. It was nice.
Corinne Fondy, who was head of the Houston Recreation Department, they brought her here to live in the settlement house. Downtown, she had the first Christmas tree in Houston, Tree of Light. She had one there, and she had first of a lot of things.
Today, what they do is they literally put a large Christmas tree out there in front of City Hall. Back in those days, what they did, there was 2 flagpoles in the section, I don't know, I guess it would be the front, that faces the little, what do you call it, lake or whatever that's out there. Well, there's 2 flagpoles, one on the right, one on the left. And what they would do, they would literally bring Christmas trees and wrap them around one of them and literally build a Christmas tree. So if the flagpole was 50 feet high, that's how high the Christmas tree was. And then they would use these big old colored, I guess 60-watt bulbs, but different colors, and they turned it on. And it was beautiful.
People would plan their day downtown to go to the National Bank of Commerce, and the employees in choir robes would come and they would take their places in a very practiced way, and they would sing quite a program of Christmas music.
It was so beautiful. It was like that. And they had a lighted tree in the back, and they sang, and they had little golden bells, and it was the real holiday spirit.
Old Foley's, it's gone. They decorated their windows so pretty. And then when the new Foley's was built after the war, they looked like they tried to outdo the old ones, and so they were really nifty.
It was different every time. They had a lot of mechanical things in them. They had toys that did mechanical, that moved and things. It was just a fascinating thing for children. It was a fairyland inside those windows. They loved it.
There were trains, and there were little figures in the trains, and then there were animated objects that would, a toy soldier that would move, and they would bow. Oh, it was just wonderful.
You could go there at the height of Christmas, and people would be standing in front of the windows 10 deep just to watch things happen.
I don't remember standing in line. I do remember there's some type of orderly procession around it, but I don't actually remember having to wait when we went.
But they'd have Santa going ho, 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 moving, and sometimes Mrs. Santa Claus, and of course always Christmas trees, many toys underneath. Sometimes they had a couple of child mannequins in there. And it was exciting, it really was.
I'd go downtown and I'd get on the escalator and I'd ride up and down the escalator at Foley's and see all the pretty stuff, and that would get me back in the Christmas spirit. It was an event to go down at Christmas to see the lights and the Foley's events in the windows, and it was very much a part of the whole celebration, was to go down and see the lights.
Many longtime residents of Houston recall the great downtown flood of 1935, but not everyone would know how that event connects to one of their favorite childhood memories, Sears Toyland.
Sears Roebuck opened the first store in this part of the country in Houston, located in Lincoln Street and Buffalo Drive, right by Buffalo Bayou. We had a terrible flood. The bayou overflowed, the store got completely flooded.
I remember that both White Oak Bayou and Buffalo Bayou, it was horrible.
But I think the water was up like to the second floor of that Sears. It was a warehouse and a store. And as I remember, the store was downstairs and the warehouse was upstairs. But I understood they moved a bunch of toys and things up higher, and I guess to the third floor and to the roof, I suppose, to kind of get them out of the water.
Dad was a freelance merchant of sorts. When that store flooded, he paid a visit to the people in charge and said, I can handle this flooded merchandise. And I can remember the manager's name at that time. His name was Kellett. And he was so pleased with the way that was handled to get that stuff out of their way so they could redo that building and get it open, at least by Christmas, that he offered my dad a job. Well, he says, well, we're going to put you in charge of toys and luggage and musical instruments and sporting goods. So toy time came, and Christmas. So he says, well, the only way to do this is to make this the biggest Toyland in the city of Houston. And they did.
I was a young girl, and I worked there in the toy department of Sears Roebuck and South Main in the Toyland. And it was a wonderland, really. Just a children's dreamland come true to go there. And all the children would come there, and my job was to sell the toys.
Sears had a humongous area in their Toyland where you had the Santa Claus, and people would be lined up all the way out the front door with the kids to get in to talk to Santa Claus.
In one end, they had the toys, the toy department where I worked, and then they went through a little opening to this other huge room, which was Toyland.
you saw things that you never saw before in the way of toys and things for Christmas and stuff like that.
And the little ones would just let go of their mama's hands and just take off running. Oh, look at this, look at that, look at that.
And it was exciting because in those days you had salespeople at every station to help you, explain things, show you things, gift wrap, all this kind of stuff.
And always an electric train going. And a big Christmas tree in the middle, and the train going around the Christmas tree. And I even enjoyed it. I loved it being there. I loved the toy department. So I imagine the children really did enjoy it.
In the late 30s, Mrs. Baird's Bakery invited young and old to a feast of the senses.
I remember loving to go by Mrs. Baird's Bakery because it was the best smell you were going to find in town.
My family moved down here in 1937 and started building the plant over on West Gray. In May of 1938, we opened that plant. And at that time, there was nothing out there but that bakery. River Oaks Center wasn't there. River Oaks was just beginning.
I can remember every time we'd drive by the bakery, you know, you'd smell the bread.
That odor just permeated the whole area, whichever way the wind was blowing. And it would just work your appetite. I mean, you could visualize those hot loaves of bread coming out.
The other Santa Claus besides Foley's was the one on West Gray outside Ms. Baird's Bakery.
So in 1939, my father was looking for ways to sort of publicize more about where our plant was. So he thought, you know, it would be interesting if we'd put a Santa Claus display out there, because the only displays that we knew of were inside. And they consisted generally of a Santa Claus sitting on a snowbank or on a throne or something. So he decided it would be interesting to do one outside on a big snowbank with a sled and the reindeer. And then he decided, well, I'm going to see if we can't put some motion in this. So they worked out a way where they could put a frame inside of these reindeer so that they would rock. And so we put sleigh bells, you know, on the reins, and you could hear the sleigh bells as the deer rocked. And so that added some animation to the display.
At Christmas time, they had a sleigh with the Santa Claus out in front that was spotlighted. And that was quite a thrill for your parents to take you over there. And you got to stand in line and walk up the steps and sit on Santa's lap in the sleigh and tell him what you wanted for Christmas.
The Santa at Baird's was just your typical Santa. I remember him being large. I don't actually remember if I could sense if that was padding or if that was really him.
They always had a real honest-to-goodness, genuine Santa Claus. I didn't have the fake beard. I don't know where they got these gentlemen, but he had a real white beard.
I asked my father about how things went during the war. And he said, well, we had a difficult time getting a proper Santa Claus because, you know, most of the able-bodied men were gone. And so he said we had to rely on older fellows, which I said, well, that probably worked out fine. And he said, well, it didn't work out too well a couple of times because some of these guys they smoked too much and they drank a little whiskey, and it just didn't work too well. And one time I can recall, he told me that he went down there to watch the display, which he loved to do. He enjoyed doing that. And Santa Claus somehow or another had a bottle up there. He got drunk and fell out of the sled. And my father took him inside, put on the Santa Claus suit himself, put a couple of pillows inside, and went back out and finished the night. And he was the Santa Claus, which he did for several days until he found another one.
And there was a sled and a Santa Claus who waved, and you'd get out of the car and you'd stand there and you'd wave back, and it was a great dialogue between you and Christmas with the smell of the bakery.
For years, Sam Houston Coliseum presented the Ice Capades, another staple for the holiday season. The show also provided something Houstonians were not really accustomed to seeing, an internationally famous star, Sonja Henie.
We loved ice skating. My sister and I both took lessons at the Polar Wave Ice Palace, and we always saw the ice skating movies of Sonja Henie.
We went to the Rice TCU game about must have been about 48, and somehow we finagled a couple of tickets and got into the box seats. And Sonja Henie, who I had always admired when she was skating, Sonja Henie and Jesse Jones had the box right in front of us, and we sat close enough to where we could reach over and hit them, and that was quite an accomplishment, we thought, in to sit behind Jesse Jones and Sonja Henie.
The Ice Capades were late at night by the time the main show began, and it was very hard for us to stay awake because we were always so cold. It was a wonderful time, but sort of a miserable time too.
I worked the Ice Capades for 20 years, and I missed 2 performances during that time. And they had, 2 weekends with 5 performances each weekend. They had 3 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. It got a little boring after you sit through them over and over and over, but I did enjoy the clown stuff, and I'd usually, could tell by the music, I'd run inside and watch a little of those clowns.
We loved it, and the colorful costumes and the glittering skates they had on.
Sonja Henie was the big star.
Oh, she was really something else. There'll never be another Sonja Henie. She was really special. Very, very good.
She was just a very, very beautiful woman to start with. Very attractive. And her costume and all was, of course, quite revealing, and it was just a beauty to watch.
I remember we had some really good seats on what would be, I guess this would be the end opposite where they would come out. So I guess those were great seats because everything was coming towards you. And we were down pretty low. The thing I remember, other than the show of it, there was a lot of times when they'd come charging out and then they would stop right in front of us, and they were coming so fast, I just didn't see how they could stop. I was waiting for them to come over into the audience.
Sonja Henie falls on the ice because when she made her entrance before the lights went up, she tripped and fell, and it front page headlines in the Houston paper, really big. Sonja Henie falls on the ice.
Man-made ice is one thing, but take my word for it. If you've lived in Houston for a week or a lifetime, one thing you know about is heat and humidity, which makes our next topic a must for any holiday scrapbook.
Oh, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in all my life, and I rushed out. I couldn't wait to make a snowball out of it. And then I was so amazed how cold my hands were. And I came in, and the first thing I did was put them under warm water, and they hurt so bad. I didn't know that's what snow would do for you, but that was my first time.
I mean, nobody could drive. Everybody was scared and slipping and sliding around, but the kids were having an absolute ball. Snowball, snow fights, it lasted like 36 hours before it was all melted and gone away. But that was historical and hysterical. Boy, that was fun.
Oh, it was a big event. Everybody took pictures, and it went on. Had to go a block to gather up enough snow to throw a snowball, but we did that anyway.
I can remember about 2 times it snowing, really. But they were good, thick snows, and we made snowmen and everything.
We choosed up sites in the neighborhood and built a little trench out of snow, and we'd take a bucket of water and make the snowballs and then dip them in that cold water and make them hard so you could throw them. And had snowball fights and things. And then we'd, build a big snowman in the yard, put a carrot for the nose and whatever you could find for the eyes and the mouth, and put a hat and a shawl and a broomstick or whatever.
Now, snow was a really great thing. And we were standing waiting to go in outside our school, and every now and then one of us would dart out and get a handful of snow, and then of course they'd get away with it. And so about 4 or 5 of us ran out at one time and were grabbing up snow, and we heard somebody clapping. And I'm telling you, we looked and they said, "Is it her?" And we ran back. I said, I don't know what children get away with nowadays, but they scared the devil out of us.
The whole ground was covered, and when you stepped into it, your whole shoe went under the snow. So we had a good day that day. We did. I remember walking to school, but we played a lot, throwing snowballs from one another. And then when we came home, I remember that myself and my brothers we played with snowballs all afternoon.
And everybody decides they're going to skip school, so the whole school left. And we didn't go to school for a week. We walked all over town to different people's homes. And we'd go to Susie's house to eat something, and we'd go to Mary Jo's house to get something to drink, and we just had a blast.
All of us juniors, we decided we'd go from one girl's house to another girl's house, and we'd play cards, and we'd have fun, and we'd make gallons of hot chocolate. Well, of course, after a couple of days of that, teenagers being what we were, so then somebody said, "Oh, I know what's fun. Let's go skid." So we found the streets that were kind of big. You speed up on your car and put on the brakes and see if you could start spinning.
But what was so fun was downtown, the buildings were not air conditioned. So the people, the office workers, all raised the windows. They would take their waste paper baskets downstairs, fill them with snow, take them back up to whatever level they worked on, and stand at the window and throw snowballs out the window at the pedestrians on the street. And it was a blast, as you can imagine, because, you know, we don't have that much snow in Houston.
The season of giving takes center stage in just a few minutes when Holiday Memories returns. Please stay tuned. Even if you are new to the Houston area, you must be aware of the commitment this community has for supporting one another in times of need. This heritage is very evident during the holidays, and for some, the ties go back for generations. One of the first to adopt this tradition was the Houston Chronicle when it established the Goodfellows in 1912.
It seems as though a little shoeshine boy was always there on the Texas entrance to get the guys when they came out to shine their shoes. And one Christmas Eve, one of the reporters, so the story goes, was leaving the Chronicle, and it was very cold. And he saw this little boy, it was really a tiny little boy, out there to shine shoes. And he said, "Why aren't you home? It's Christmas Eve, and you don't have a coat." You know, the usual thing that would bring him a few tears. And then he went back upstairs, and he said in the city room, I guess, "We've got to help some of these children." Oh, he brought the little boy up with him. And that's how the Goodfellows started originally.
While I was on the Chronicle for a while, I wrote human interest stories about the people who had applied for gifts for their children, toys and clothing and various things of everything that a child would need to make his Christmas a happier time.
So their substitute for Santa Claus was the Chronicle Goodfellows letter, because they knew that their letters would be noticed and that somebody, maybe Santa Claus himself, would come on Christmas and answer their letters and bring them what they had asked for in their Goodfellow letter. And so they were very touching to read, because these children really believed in Santa Claus, and they really wanted what Santa Claus could bring, and that was their only way to say, "That's what I want."
During Christmas, he always did things for the Goodfellows. They put on shows, and he rented the place out for charity things and donate all the money to it.
We participated in the Goodfellows in soliciting packages or toys and then wrapping them in colorful Christmas wrap, and then writing on the outside and on a little card for a girl from 6 to 8, or if it was a boy from 6 to 8, or from 6 to 10. It depends on what the toy was.
he collected toys, and he'd make all the poor waitresses and everybody donate to everything.
And one summer, my sister and I made a very elaborate swing of a, like an airplane. Our granddad helped us. We were selling rides on our very fine airplane swing. And my sister had made medals for everyone who would come out of crepe paper and cardboard in colors and safety pins. And you would get a very long ride. I think it was probably for a nickel or so. Then she would pin this medal on you, and all of the money collected went to the Goodfellows.
For a number of years, my oldest sister, Keeter Skelton, worked for the Goodfellows. She was in charge completely, except she didn't write the editorial material. But she went to the toy markets, bought all the toys. She oversaw the filling of the orders for all the families, and to make sure if you had say I had 5 children of different ages, that the gifts that the Goodfellows gave those children were gifts that were appropriate for their age level. And then the distribution of them to the home, the gifts to the various homes throughout the entire city. And it was a major endeavor, and still is till this day.
Almost 100 years ago, the Married Ladies Social, Art, and Charity Club was founded. This select group of influential women in Houston's black community was also among the city's early holiday benefactors.
The Married Ladies Club was organized in 1902 in the home of Mrs. Mary Crawford, a nonprofit organization organized for the purpose of cultural enlightenment, for charitable work, and for social welfare. They were concerned about improving the conditions of people within the community.
Well, they had so many good purposes: to help those who were in need, and to help young women who needed help with children, with their children, and to help just to do any type of volunteer work that would help somebody who was in need.
And they would go to those meetings religiously, all dolled up, and working as best they could to help children. They would buy shoes, help them with scholarships, or do things to help children who couldn't otherwise go to college.
The membership of the Married Ladies Club at the time it was established was limited to 75 women.
When I first joined, they were doing needlework for the soldiers, and they would make aprons to sell and all like that.
Well, one of the activities of the Married Ladies Club was to make quilts. The quilting was one of the big projects that they did each year, and they made quilts that they gave to people within the community around the holidays.
They were the forerunners of what now fraternities and sororities used to do, and they were very selective in their membership. And if you were invited to join the Married Ladies Club, you were really in the know.
Ladies of the club are all, in most cases, they are some member of a family, a descendant of some of the families in the early 30s and 40s who made some great contributions to the city of Houston and to the social lives of people within the community.
For most homes in Houston, the family celebration of the Christmas season begins with a tree and its decorations. Over the years, a lot has changed.
Well, at Christmas time, of course, they didn't have Christmas vendors, tree vendors all over the town. So you went out and got a pine tree, and of course, there were plenty of pine trees around Houston.
My father would go out in the woods and find the best looking fir tree that he could find and cut that tree down and bring it home, and that was my Christmas tree.
And I still have a vivid remembrance of my dad carrying this tree home on his shoulders, and of course it was just pouring rain on him, and the tree was soaking up all this water, and he would just come in like a drowned rat. But he always had to put it on the porch and then wait for Santa Claus. And I never did see anybody decorate a tree. But on Christmas morning, there it was, all decorated.
We had 3 great big glass ornaments. They really were about that big, that belonged to my grandfather, who brought them from Germany. And those always were the very careful ones. They were heavy, so we made sure we put them on the bottom limbs, and that was the real deal. My dad would let my brother and I place those 3 big ones. Those were the ones that were special. All the rest of them, we tended to break them too much.
There was a bird that was a snap-on, and this was very, very much a part of our Christmases from Christmas to Christmas. And over the years, I'm sure when he started, he had a rather magnificent plumage, but it got down to being 4 little strands of very limp, feather-looking things that, and he's all peeled, but we would take him out very, very carefully, and he was the first ornament to go on the tree.
Most people, you know, bought the ornaments, and of course had the live candles on them, which was always dangerous.
We had cranberries and popcorn, and then I remember pasting rings of colored paper together and decorating the tree with that.
And I started getting popcorn and making popcorn and made a wreath out of it and made some strings and stringed the popcorn around the tree and made little paper decorations and hung them up. And we were very happy with it because it was our first tree.
I loved the Christmas story. I love the mystery of Santa Claus. And I love the mystery of how Santa Claus must have been around my house sometimes before Christmas, because there was always the smell of apples around my house. And on Christmas morning, guess what? There were apples under the Christmas tree.
They'd tell us you better go to bed and go to sleep too, because Santa's coming. And we would want to stay up late as we could, you know. But then we had to go to bed because we expected Santa that night, and that was a good way for them to get us into bed.
Out in the hall, we rattledy-bang and ding-a-ling and bells ringing, and we ran to the front door that had a glass on it. There's the reindeer. There was a great big horns there, and Santa Claus is coming. Santa Claus is outside. And about that time, he came through the door in his red suit and his white beard. Oh, what did you bring me, Santa Claus? I brought you some oranges and some apples and some firecrackers. Oh, we can shoot firecrackers tomorrow. Great.
We had in our front yard, shot off all these fireworks. And the next day, Mama gathered up all those fireworks that she thought were dead, put them in the fireplace to get rid of them, and they shot off. There were still a lot of them had balls, still had the fireballs in them, and there were little bird spots all over the living room, and the cat was about twice as big. His hair was all up, and his eyes were so big. We kidded Mama for a long time about burning the house down with the fireworks.
Christmas morning, there were snow tracks in the carpet. And that was proof positive. Now, I'm sure it was sand or flour. And the snow tracks, even as I go back and look at them, that looks very much like the size of my father's foot, putting his shoes in the flour or the sand to make the tracks.
Us mothers would make a piñata out of a pitcher made of clay, and we'd fill it of candy
and we'd add the paper mache around it in different colors, and we'd make devils, angels, or whatever thing we wanted to make out of it. So then they'd start whacking at it, and we'd give them about 3 or 4 times at it until we saw that they were getting tired of it, and we'd let one of them hit it. After they banged on it, the candies were scattered all over the floor, and they'd go to it.
The tamale tradition, that's what, you know, most of us have for that Christmas. Well, we used to have it on Christmas Eve. A lot of people now have it Christmas Day. But we used to, my mother used to prepare everything and get us, everybody to join in and teach us how to make the tamales, you know, but you start early in the morning and to have everything ready by, you know, by night.
They weren't elaborate Christmases. It was everything that my mother could do. The poor thing, you know, she didn't have much money, and nobody had much money in those days. You know, in those days it was depression. Don't forget the depression came in those days too. It was just very. And I know my mother had that grocery store, and the people were coming in getting groceries and one thing, and they couldn't pay for it. She never would turn them down, never. And they did. They finally, you know, when they got their jobs and went back to work, they caught up with their bills. I never will forget that.
We just didn't have very much money. My mother-in-law kept sending me checks to buy furniture, and I would buy groceries instead. But so comes Christmas Eve, and this delivery man came with an orchid tree. I mean a tree. It wasn't a branch, it was a tree. And 2 bottles of iced Dom Perignon and a 14-ounce tin of caviar, the finest. We didn't have a pot, as the old saying goes. And I said, what the hell? Let's sit under the tree and drink the champagne and eat the caviar. I think it was the most fun new Christmas Eve I ever had. Certainly the most prosperous for us.
Well, during World War II, the whole country was on a war footing. In my grandfather's case, he was producing as much oil as he could, you know, keep the war effort going, buy war bonds and promote that. And also, he invited all the armed force people that were in Houston to Christmas dinner. I think they had an overflow crowd and had to arrange for, you know, some of the other places around town to take care of them. But that was not an unusual thing.
Great sense of continuity about Christmas that I wonder if a more transient society has not lost that feeling of continuity, because the Christmas wrappings always went to the same place in the attic, and it came down the same boxes.
Like traditions, Christmas memories endure for a lifetime.
What a lot of people who are now my age and older remember about the hardware store when we were kids is the train set he had built and put in the window. So Dad builds this box, cuts out a foil shape, a tinfoil shape of a hand, and sticks that on the store window on the inside of it. And you could come up and put your hand on that handprint, and then the whole train set would light up and go. A lot of customers saw it. And he built a bunch of train sets that he'd deliver Christmas Day. That got to be kind of a tradition in the neighborhood, that he was running around with a helper in a pickup truck delivering train sets on Christmas morning.
Yeah, the first electric train was the Lionel. It was a gray engine, and then it was a freight train. And I probably had enough track for one big circle. And so I remember putting it out in the living room, and we all hitched it up, and of course it didn't work.
Well, of course, you know, everybody wants their first bicycle, which I got when I was, I think, 7 or 8, 9 years old. And I only cracked it up 2 or 3 times until I learned to ride on it.
I remember my first bicycle, because I remember very clearly walking into the living room, and there was a bicycle, which I'd wanted very, very much. And with this, in this bicycle, there was a list of all the people that had contributed in order for that bicycle to be mine. My grandfather's name, all their family, and everybody contributed because money was scarce, very scarce.
I remember that I wanted some skates, some roller skates, and because the girl in my neighborhood had some, but she was 7 years old. But I was around 5 years old, but I wanted those skates.
If you got a pair of skates for Christmas, that was great. And then about 3 or 4 months later, you would take the skates apart and you'd make scooters. You can make 2 scooters from a pair of skates.
I like dolls. I was old-fashioned. I like dolls, and I like to get doll clothes.
And it was a bisque doll, and it looked like a real baby, and its eyes blinked, and I adored that baby. And then I got a brown wicker baby carriage for her to ride in, and that was pride of my life.
I remember my dad, my dad and mom gave me a coat. It was a coat, and it had like a collar with mink. Well, it wasn't mink, but anyway. I thought, and I loved that coat so much. I used to take it to school and really, you know, I thought, oh, here I come, or something like that with my coat my dad gave me that Christmas. I'll never forget that.
Well, I guess our most memorable Christmas was the year my sister and I got a St. Bernard puppy. And this was a very big puppy dog. We also got from Santa Claus huge baby carriages. These were large white leather buggies, and in each one there were 5 big baby dolls. These were the Diane quintuplets. We were just overwhelmed with this Christmas gift, and of course very excited. And our puppy was very excited too, and that was the year he dumped over the Christmas tree. So Mom and Dad were very excited also.
The best Christmas present I ever got, I think, was a big boat. It was about this big, sort of a schooner type thing with sails. You could set the sails and turn the sails, and they would take me out to Herman Park, let me sail in the pond there. And it was I remember that as a really fun thing.
Well, my teddy bear, he'll be 94 years old this Christmas. I still have him. He's so beaten up and chewed up and everything else, but he's right there on the living room divan. But he, I think, was my favorite Christmas present.
Treading on the heels of Christmas, the beginning of a new year provides one final opportunity for a holiday celebration. For many, the Rice Hotel was often the focus of those festivities.
The Rice Hotel was always a center of a lot of social activity.
Now, Christmas parties were up there, they were booked solid. And you had to, you know, take your turn and get your time in, because if the hotel booked something, that was it. It wouldn't be any more, you know, till the next year.
Now that is one thing we used to do on around the holidays. There was always parties, of course, there, and especially at Christmas time and New Year's. And the ladies, of course, we always liked to see how pretty they were dressed.
And of course, in the evening, that's where the adults love to go and have maybe a special Christmas celebration in the Empire Room. Not on the roof, because the roof was cold in the winter. The roof was for the summer, where the summer breezes made it cooler before air conditioning. But the Empire Room and the ballroom, that was a different matter.
We had one group in the Crystal Ballroom. It was a total of 400 people, which was against fire regulations at the time. And the fire department came in and they said they didn't want to see that any longer. There were so many people you could just, they were shoulder to shoulder in there. And they didn't want, you know, something happened and we didn't want nothing to happen, so we stopped it. And anybody had 500 more group that we had to split them up, you know, different functions in different rooms. But 250 was the maximum in the Crystal Ballroom at that time. But I know they had 400 and they were shoulder to shoulder. You couldn't even hardly, and dancing in there. They said no more of that.
Mother and Daddy would go out and they'd bring home all their, you know, they always put hats and horns and all of that on the nightclub tables, and they'd bring that home.
It was so tight, and I don't know how they could dance, but they'd always have a floor show and everything, and everybody had a good time.
Mother and Daddy got up to dance, and as they're dancing, they could hear a child screaming. And Mother said today, now, some parent needs to take care of that child. And as they danced around, they found it was me, and I was standing at the rail. And no, the other people couldn't get me still or anything, just sobbing. And Mother and Daddy came up and were talking to me, and I thought they had left me. If it wasn't, I wanted to dance, and I can remember this. I remember standing on Daddy's shoes, and he had to hold my hands up, and that was what I wanted. I wanted to be part of the show.
It was so exciting to live in the time when downtown was Christmas excitement.
Those were the wonderful days of Houston too, because everybody seemed to know everybody.
Everybody was happy. It was Christmas time.
It was a very, very special time. I enjoyed Christmas very much.
It's a wonderful time of the year to celebrate and to thank the good Lord that we're all here happy, we're healthy, and we're at peace with one another. It's the holiday that I really enjoy a lot.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of Houston Remember When Holiday Memories as much as I enjoyed being your host. I'm Doug Johnson for Houston Public Television. May all your holidays be pleasant ones.
Houston Remember When Holiday Memories is made possible in part through grants from the Fondren Foundation, Shell Oil Company Foundation on behalf of the employees of Shell Oil Company, and Houston Endowment, a philanthropy endowed by Mr. and Mrs. Jesse H. Jones.